I've slowly been attempting to explain absolutely everything about Gaster in a series of videos. Last time we concluded that Gaster is the self-insert of Toby Fox himself, acting as the in-universe creator of these worlds. When looking back at some of the details regarding Sans and Papyrus, I had an epiphany. Sans and Papyrus were born in the Void. Now, as many people know, the Void was a completely fanon concept and idea for where Gaster went after falling into his creation and getting shattered, that somehow got popularized by fan content. But what does exist is this area in Deltarune called the Depths, and this spot where Sans and Papyrus are in the Kickstarter rewards trailer called the Mysterious Black Void. Going with the line from the shopkeeper of how they just showed up one day and asserted themselves into Snowdin, in the Papyrus Q&A, one of the questions is what was life like before Snowdin? The only detail that we get is that there was green grass, and then Sans tells Papyrus that the shower is open, he leaves, and Sans takes over the Q&A and ends it instantly. Many people assume that this means Sans and Papyrus came from hometown from Deltarune, since there is nowhere in the underground that has green grass aside from the two flower rooms. But that's exactly it. There's always been something odd about these rooms. One is the very second room of the underground, and one is outside the barrier. And it's somewhat implied that this room is where the first golden flower bloomed that became Flowey. But how would Alphys get into this room to inject the flower? It seems to actually be saying that Azrael grabbed a flower or seed from the surface village and collapsed with the flower in the throne room. So there has to be another explanation for the significance of these rooms. And there is. The same room is seen where Sans and Papyrus are lounging around in the Kickstarter. Now, I don't think this room is actually where they are in the Kickstarter. As said by Papyrus, it's mysterious. It's not just a darkened room. Now, I know someone's gonna say that. So yes, Toby did in fact say that the Kickstarter is not canon. But just like with the merch, that only means these specific scenarios aren't canon. Toby still cares about this stuff being accurate to the lore. Why else would Toby change the Kara card? Obviously, Sans and Papyrus talking to the Kickstarter backers about fan trolls isn't canon, but the Black Void they reside in still could be, especially since we know that the Papyrus's cool song, which only shows up in the Kickstarter and hasn't been seen anywhere else, is also canon. Okay, let's get to the significance already. Let's get the obvious out of the way. Gaster is Sans and Papyrus's dad. Last time we concluded that Gaster is Toby Fox himself, so it doesn't have to be completely literal, as he's the creator of all of the characters, but there's clear evidence that he's always been intended to be a father figure, even if not canon anymore. There was the elusive Grandpa Semi, a part of the skeleton family. In order for there to be a grandpa, there has to be a dad, and there's no other skeleton family members we know of. So without complete speculation of characters that don't exist and greatly overanalyzing Toby's handwriting, there's only one candidate. Since we see a ton of characters in both Undertale and Deltarune that have fathers and mothers, while the undead monsters are still largely a mystery when it comes to their science, the lack of mothers in the skeleton family would imply some other kind of creation. Whether that be the meta of being a video game character created, or being a Darkner, which don't seem to be natural beings. Next, the lawn chair Sans uses has cropped up 3 times in Deltarune now, in the Dark World, and is always associated with the Spade family. I've always been a supporter of the Sans as a Darkner theory, and specifically that he is the elusive Ace of Spades, a part of the Spade family. We've been saying that the Black Void is some kind of equivalent to the Depths in Undertale, since it's where Gaster resides. The texture of the Dark Fountains is the same as the texture used for the Depths. That, combined with the name, makes it very clear that the Depths are somewhere underneath the Dark Worlds. A darker yet darker world, if you will. This could explain how Sans can be a Darkner and not turn into an object when leaving the Dark World, like how Rousey's a special Darkner because the castle town is pure darkness. These boneheads come from the very source, so they could behave radically different to regular ones and might not even need objects to come to life. But a random crack-eyed idea to throw out is, what if the objects that they're born from are actual human skeletons? If they're completely dead, they could constitute as objects, and thus apply to the object rule. Not saying I think this is canon, but it sure is interesting, and goes kind of with some of Jaru's theories about the graveyard being reanimated in the Dark World. Okay, so what actually is the Void in this meta-narrative? I think it's the creative space given form. Because what do you have when you first start game development? An empty void of boundless creativity. And who is the one person we know exists in this space? The creator. This is also the place where the player is most directly interacted with by the creator, showing this place is the closest thing there is to being outside of the game world. And overall, Sans and Papyrus seem somewhat disconnected to their world. While everyone else is bound to this fantasy world and its rules, these two casually manipulate space and time and have constant hints towards some greater role. People often say it's just Sans who stands out, but Papyrus is also aware and unfazed by the idea of Sans pranking us across time and space. Papyrus also says "my video game" in the trailer, instead of something more vague like "our video game," which would just say, "I am a character from this game," but by saying it belongs to him, it's almost like he's saying he's a part of the development team who made the game, along with Gaster. There's one minor flaw in this whole theory, which is that Sans says he gave up trying to go back. Why would Sans want to go back to an empty void exactly? I mean, unless him and his dad just goofed off in the void all day, I guess I could see that being fun. But this is the nothing. So the void only existed as a temporary space to create this world. What will be the point of going back? And I know a lot of people are dead set on the idea that they come from hometown and are going to disregard this. But what if we found a compromise? What if they came from the depths and from Deltarune? Let's look at the evidence for and against hometown, and how it could fit in with the other theory. A thing people like to use to debunk hometown is, Papyrus doesn't know what the sun is, but there's a high chance Papyrus in Deltarune is like the original idea for Papyrus being a neckbeard, so there's a high chance that he's never seen the sun. That would also most likely mean he wouldn't see grass, unless Sans brought some in the house, which is honestly a pretty Sans thing to do. And if he was born in darkness, it would be even more likely that he would avoid light. My biggest objection to these theories is that Sans acknowledges we've met before, so either Chris and Sans have some secret past, there's another game where we haven't seen yet where we meet Sans, that comes before this in the timeline, or Toby lied about them being unable to fix the machine and they actually did make their way back to Deltarune. And honestly, Toby lying seems like the most likely answer here. Deltarune is also somewhat implied to be created by Gaster after Undertale. They couldn't have come from a universe that didn't exist yet. But it could be that the world already existed, but Gaster just recently pulled the strings into place. One final confusing thing is the river person rarely says, "Beware of the man who came from the other world," along with the man who speaks in hands, of course. Many have said that this is referring to Sans, who came from Deltarune, but if Papyrus also came from Deltarune, why did they only say man and not men? It being Gaster also seems strange because Gaster's theme in Deltarune is specifically called Another Him, as in a second Gaster. If Gaster from Deltarune went to Undertale, that would make no sense. Unless, of course, we go back to the meta theory and this other world is the real world which Toby entered from. In summary, Sans and Papyrus were darkners created by Gaster in the depths that eventually enter the light world, and then eventually travel to Undertale, and then eventually travel back to the Deltarune universe. Overall, this theory is a lot more speculation, doesn't have too many major effects on the world, other than to allow us to disregard what skeleton monsters are, since they are something outside of the universe, which will hopefully make understanding the ghosts easier too. And while I don't usually like closing doors on more creative theory potential, undead monster lore in Undertale is endlessly confusing and has basically nothing grounded about it. Making theories about it is more like making fan fiction. Best we just leave this door closed. Like and subscribe for more crackhead conspiracies about video games.